All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I'm going over this series of 11 articles on getting started with ASP.NET MVC 5. I've done the getting started, adding a controller, adding a view, adding a model, creating a connection string, and working with SQL Server Local DB. I just finished the accessing your model's data from a controller, and it's time now for examining the edit methods and edit view. So, as the author says here, in this section, you'll examine the generated edit action methods and views for the movie controller. But first, it says, let's take a short diversion. Let me show you what the author means by let's take a short diversion. Okay? If we go and run our application in its current form, and I like what the author's doing here. There's really nothing wrong with the application in its current format. There's nothing wrong with it. It now works, which is, of course, a very important thing. All right, but I want to go over to movies, and I want to actually bring up my data that's in the database, and it will be on the screen. There we go. And you'll notice the release date. If you remember, I came in and changed the time on Armageddon, but we don't really need this time. And if you don't put in a time, and I didn't, it defaults to midnight. So the author says what they want us to do here, and it's pretty simple. They want us to open the models movies.cs file and add the highlighted lines as shown above. Well, let's go and look at them, and let's add them, and then we'll go back in and we'll look at what they all mean. Let's do it that way. So stop the run here. And I want to go to my models movie.cs file, which is right here. And they're telling us to add some code in here. Okay? So in particular, the author says to add this using statement. And I don't like to normally do this, but I'm going to add it in directly. In other words, I'm not going to paste it first into Notepad and then add it. So I'm going to add that using. They want us to add that right here. There that is. Okay. And then they want us to come in, and after we've got our two variables, they want us to add these 3 lines. Whoops, that are right here. Copy those. And right after the string title. Looks a little funky. Yep, right before release date. Okay, so right up above release date. I'm going to do it just the way they do it. Okay. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to tell us with our release date, for lack of better words, we don't need to see the time of the release date. Okay? So, if I did it correctly, we'll find out right now. Let's save and let's run. And you should know this by now, that if it comes up and it gives me an error message down here someplace, and it would, that I did something wrong. One of the reasons that I'm just copying this stuff as opposed to keying that stuff in myself is I'm much more apt to make a mistake. Now, they do mention, as I'm waiting for this to come up, had we wanted to, we could have also made it culture specific. And what that means is that different cultures show a date in different ways. Today is the 9th of June 2017, and in many cultures, I mean, what I mean is this. Some places would show today's date as 06-09-2017. Others might show it as 06-09-2017. Sometimes the zeros are not mandatory, so you could have had just a 6. The actual universal way of showing a date is like this. All All right, but there are cultures that may list the day first, then the month, then the year, or the year first and then the month and the day, etc. So if you ever read anything on this stuff and it talks about localization, that's pretty much what they mean. Now the author says that they're going to cover data annotations in the next tutorial, all right, which I believe is going to be here, okay? So this display attribute that you see right here specifies what to display for the name. So in other words, we want release date in 2 words instead of in 1 word. The data type attribute specifies the type of data, which says that it's a date field, all right, and the display format, as it says, is needed for a bug in Chrome that renders date formats incorrectly. So ideally, when we put that back in, what we're going to see is the release date both in 2 words up in the title, and our time will be gone. So let's see if indeed that's the case. So let's peruse our way over here to movies. Now it has a different format here than what's shown for us. I could be wrong here. I often am. But I'm going to change this to DD. Oops, gotta stop the run first. I'm going to try to change this to DD dash. I'm sorry. MM dash DD dash YYYY, and I'm going to remove that formatting so it looks like this. Again, if I screwed it up, I'll have to revert it back to the way that it looked previously. So we're telling it to run again. This is going to again bring up our index page from our home controller. As we know, that's what comes up by default. And then we'll have to change this once it comes up to our movies page. But then ideally, you're going to both see release date as 2 words, and you're going to see it formatted so that it looks the way that it does on page 2 of this article. And there we've got it. Okay? Now the author says if we take our mouse and hold it over the edit link, it's very hard to see, but if you look down on the very bottom of the page here, and I can't move it up, but it shows that it's going to localhost : our port number, which for us is 53484, /movies/edit/1. If I go over to details, it's the same thing, but it's /movies/details/1. And if I go over to delete, it's the same thing, but /movies/delete/1. This edit link was generated by the HTML action link in the views movies index.cs HTML file. All right, what does that mean? Well, let's take a look at the file in question. All right, so we're going to the views. Movies index.cs HTML file. All right. And if we go over there's the edit right there. So it's telling us to edit, and it's telling us to show the current ID. All right? For details and for delete, same kind of thing. Now they mention in here, and we can put our mouse on here, and that's what they're telling us at least, and get more information. Okay, it's kind of hard to see that from right there, but it's also shown in page 3. But it says the HTML object is a helper that's exposed using a property that's based on the system.web.mvc.webViewPage base class. This action link makes it easier to dynamically generate HTML hyperlinks that link to action methods on controllers. Okay. The first argument that's here is a link, the link text to render, rather. And that's the word edit. The second argument is the name of the action method to invoke. Again, it's edit. The final argument is an anonymous object which will hold the name of whatever movie it is we want to be editing at the time. So, as we saw, that generated link was http://localhost:53484/movie/edit/1. All right, the default route that's in our route.config.cs file, remember, uses that pattern controller/action/ID. So in other words, what we're asking for is the movies controller, the edit action method with a parameter ID of 1. Okay, so that's, basically is the way that it's set up. Now, there's also another way that we should be able to do this. So let's try it. This is explained on the bottom of page 4 that's in the book. And in there, what they explain, and I'm going to stop the run here. I guess I didn't need to. I was already running, but that's okay. I'm going to see if I can have this edit that comes up, but I want to do it by having it come up. So I'm going to say here, movies, edit, ID equal 1, and hit enter. And notice it's bringing me up in edit mode with the first record. The difference is this time, rather than using the typical MVC routing pattern, I actually put it in as a query string. Just to show that there's more than one way of doing the same thing. All right, next they want us to open up the movies controller and look at the stop the run here. They want us to open up the movies controller, so I'm going to go back to controllers. It gets kind of difficult because you've got a lot of stuff. I'd suggest when you're not using something, and I can do this here too, is start to close files you don't need. As you can see, I've got a lot of them open. Oops. And also, as you work your way in here, close these folders if you're not using them. So they want us to come in there to controllers and open up the movies controller. All right. It says the two edit actions are shown below. There was details. There's create. There's one edit method right here, and there's the other edit method right there. Okay? And for now, we want to look at this second edit method. Let me move this over so I can try to give this as much room as possible to look in here. So it says, notice that the second edit method is preceded by an HTTP post attribute. This attribute specifies that the overload of the edit method can be invoked only for post requests. Remember the difference between a GET request and a POST request. If you're doing a GET request, all right, so if you are doing a GET request, you're not changing the information. If you're doing a POST request, you are potentially changing the information. You could apply the HTTP GET attribute to the first method, but it's not necessary because that's the default. All right, and they mention in the handout here, or in the article, the author says here, and that's right where I am, the bind attribute is another important security mechanism that keeps hackers from overposting to your data model. So if you want more on that, you can click the link. You should only include properties in the bind attribute that you may want to change. So again, there is a article that the author wrote about overposting and the bind attribute, talking about overposting security note. Okay? In this tutorial, we're binding all of the data in the model because we could conceivably want to change any of the 4 fields that we have. All right. In addition, and I'm going to pop over here and then pop back again, there is something over here that says validate anti-forgery token. And they mention here that's used to prevent forgery of a request. So it's what you don't want to be able to do is allow a user to go in and access this database and, for example, and we haven't even talked about things like admin privileges, but you never want to set it up so that anyone is able to go in there and, as an example, change the price of a movie. I tell this very quick little story here of years ago. I was watching a security webinar, and it was interesting for a lot of reasons. The speaker was interesting, but he was talking about exposed data. And he mentioned that this was a conference, I believe it was in San Francisco, California. And the person giving the webinar mentioned that the night before the conference, he came to his hotel and he decided to try to get some work done. So when he was in his room, he started up his laptop and he noticed there was a thing there that said Internet $9.99. So he was going to sign up for the Internet, and he noticed all of the stuff for the Internet was posted up here as a query string, which you really shouldn't do because it was pricing information. So he went and manually changed it from $9.99 to $1.99, then signed up for it. Now, he knew what he was doing wasn't legal, but he wanted to see whether or not it would work. And then he went downstairs and asked at the main desk if he could have a copy of his bill. They were a little bit surprised and said, "Are you checking out? Are you unhappy?" And he said, "No, for my records, I just wanted a copy so far of my bill." And he said that the clerk working at the hotel, ran off a copy, looked at it, didn't seem to see anything funny, and gave it to him. He said thank you, went back up to his room and checked, and sure enough, he had been charged $1.99 for his internet usage. All right? You don't ever want to set a system up, whether it's a movie database like this or something else, where people are able to go in and do illegal types of things. All right? So, as mentioned here, and let's again look at the regular code, the author says this anti-forgery token that we put in here, it generates a hidden form anti-forgery token that must match the edit method of the movie's controller. So it's happening behind the scenes so that you're not able to go in and either change information or, even worse, for example, if I was going in and editing one of those records or adding a new record, you'd never want to set it up so that I'd be able to, for one of the fields, put in JavaScript. If you are ever running an HTML form Now, I'm not advocating doing this. What I'm about to tell you, you should never do. But as an example, let's say that I had myself an HTML form. Okay? So let's just say that I've got this HTML form. And in this form, I've got a label here that says first name. Okay? And over here, I'm just going to show it with underscores, but there's a label. Okay? If I go in where that label is and I put in there, for example, script, and I'm very simply just going to put in this alert, hello. Looks innocent enough, at least in my opinion it does. If I put that in, and just in that field, and I click a submit button, and I get a dialog box, an alert modal dialog box that comes up that says hello, that's a really bad thing. What that means is it's possible for me to go in there and add JavaScript to a form field. Now, all I was doing was an alert with hello, but I could conceivably go in there, and let's say this was a movie database. It would have a lot more in it than one table like we have. I might be able to, for example, go in there and dump a list of all the clients. Then I'd have information about people, maybe even things like debit card numbers or credit card numbers or whatever. I could go in and change prices, etc. So you never want to allow that to happen. Now, if you want to see more on this type of thing, the author mentions here that you can go in and read his tutorial on XSRF, which is basically cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery scripting. And I gave it to you in a nutshell. All right. Is there more to it than that? Of course there is. About 7 years ago, I went to a conference on the PHP programming language in San Diego, California. The reason I'm telling you this is while I was there, I decided, it was the second or third day of the conference, there was a breakout session on cross-site request forgery. And I thought it sounded like it was interesting. I knew a little bit about it. I wanted to learn more. So I decided I was going to go to this breakout session. I had been to a different one earlier in the morning. It was in the same room. There was space in there for about 25, maybe 50 people. I got in there about 10 minutes before it started. I was lucky that I was able to find a chair because in my estimate, there were about 250 people crammed into a room for 50 people. They were hanging all over the place. The reason for me telling you this is cross-site scripting. And, it's very much a security issue. And it's very important that people realize, all right, that it's the kind of thing that if it's not handled in a program, okay, if it's not handled in your program, bad things can happen. All right. Let's go jump back into our code. So this is, again, that edit view that was generated by the Visual Studio scaffolding system. All right, and what they want in here is, where are we? We don't want shared, we want there. Edit, okay? So this code that you see right here is the same code that you see on page 8 of the article. The author says, notice how the view template at the top has our @model directive with movie MVC movie.models.movie at the top, which again specifies that the view expects the model for the view template to be of type movie. We've looked at that before. This scaffolding that we did, it uses several helper methods to streamline the HTML markup, such as it uses the label for helper that you see here as an example, and that displays the name of the field, the edit for helper, as you see here, which renders an HTML input element, and the validation message for, which displays any validation methods that are associated with it. So this form data gets posted to the server when the save button is clicked. Okay, all right. I'm going to go on in the article here to processing the post request, which is down right here. And it's page 11 if you are following along, also in the associated article. So the author says the following listing shows the HTTP post version of the edit method. Okay, well, what does that mean? Again, let's go back. The answer is always in the code. So here's the HTTP post for the edit method. And it's all right there. Again, this validate anti-forgery token validates the cross-site request forgery token that we talked about earlier. Okay. The ASP.NET MVC model binder takes the posted form values and it creates a movie object. And that's passed as the movie parameter. Okay. The model state.isValid method verifies that the data can be used to modify, edit, or update the movie object. In other words, did we put in valid data? If the data is valid, the movie data is going to be saved to our movies collection, right there. The new movie data is saved to the database by calling save changes. After saving the data, the code then redirects us back to the index action method. As soon as the client-side validation determines the values of the field are not valid, an error message should be displayed. Now, if you disable JavaScript, you won't have client-side validation, but you'll still detect it on the server side. There typically is not a reason for you to ever come in and not have JavaScript enabled. But if your person is running the application, they may have JavaScript disabled. Someone may have told them, hey, you should disable JavaScript. It's evil, for example. Okay, it's possible that that's happened. Let's go to movies right here. And I want to see if we can go in and add a new movie. So I'm going to come in here, and they've got in the book on page 12, Rio Bravo. All right. For a release date, I'm going to put in here AB. I want to put ABC, but it won't let me. Notice now it's got our thing set up. Let's just leave it like that. Okay, MMDDYYYY. The genre, it's a Western. And the price, they have us put in here XYZ. And we're going to click Create. Notice what we get. The release date is required. In fact, let's make all of them blank. And the only things that are required are release date and price. All right? So we don't need a title, although it would sure be a good thing to put a title in there. All right? We don't need a release date. Well, let's check. Release date. This is how I found out all those release dates. So Rio Bravo. And its release date was March 18th, 1959. It's an oldie but a goodie. Actually is a good movie. 03, what was it, the 18th, I think? 1959. And notice the genre, it's a Western. And now all we get is that error. And that is not an error that says it was a required field. It says it's a field that is not formatted correctly. So if we put in 899 and click Create, now everything's valid, and there's our Rio Bravo entry down on the bottom. All right? So that's what's shown in the book, or in the article, basically on page 12. And the author mentions then that all HTTP GET methods follow a similar pattern. They get a movie object or a list of objects, and they pass the model to the view. The create method, if we're creating a new record, passes an empty movie object to the create view. All the methods that create, edit, delete, or otherwise modify data do so in the post overload, so it's always going to be calling that one. Modifying data in the get is a security risk, and you should never do it. Modifying data in a get also violates HTTP best practices and the architectural REST pattern, which specifies that GET requests should not change the state of the application. In other words, GET should be a read-only type of operation. Now, on the bottom of page 13, and on page 14, and on page 15, and on page 16, what the author mentions in here, and let me show you. I'll show you here. So that's what we just did. Again, our release date is much better now. But the author mentions that if you were working where you weren't able to put in dollars and cents, this is how you fix it and go through globalization. We've already got it. We've already got the globalize entered. So I'm not going to go through that. I don't see any reason to do so. Okay? So this puts us on the bottom of page 16 here, which says to avoid repeating code in every edit view, you can move it to the layout file. All right, to optimize the script downloads, you can see the author's tutorial on doing this. The idea is, if you're doing the same thing more than once in more than one area of code, by moving it to the layout file, you can put it in there only once. All right? This isn't an issue for us because, again, it worked just fine. So that brings us to the end of part 7. We're going to go on in just a second to part 8. And part 8 allows us to add a search method and a search view. So we'll, by the end of this next lesson, we'll be able to search for movies by either genre or by name. So I'll be back with that particular video in just a couple minutes.